Hey guys, welcome back to Dance Experts. Today I am so excited, and I know I do say that probably every week because I have some just amazing guests and I always have so much fun doing these. But today I get to bring on not only a dance expert, but also one of my very good friends, Julie. So Julie, thank you so much for being here. I cannot wait for today. For those people who probably we have quite a lot of crossover, but for people who don't know yet, can you just give us a little intro?
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here today. It's always fun to chat with you, and I'm sure everyone is in for a long conversation with us because we could go on forever about this stuff. I am a ballet teacher specializing in adult learners, so people who are coming to ballet without sort of childhood training, people coming to ballet without former, prior, even athletic knowledge, to be honest, just people, regular people who have a love and a passion for ballet and who want to really enjoy it in a really deep and meaningful way within their lives. And so I specialize in teaching the adult learners, both here supporting you within your local studio environment. I support you from my home, teaching Zoom classes and recorded classes online every day, and also offer a summer intensive and performance here in Miami where you can put together your own solo, wear a tutu, bring your choreography to the stage, and yeah, bring it down here to Miami, have a week-long festival and class. So that's where I'm at. I am I love this adult learner who is so curious and so passionate and so new to the world. You really get a chance to open people's eyes to a whole new life, a whole new experience with their body, and that's just super exciting.
Yeah, and Julie is like such an amazing person to do that with for many, many reasons. Like not only her deep knowledge of ballet and technique, but also just how you approach learning in general. And I know I'm sure we'll get into that today. And also just the incredible opportunities that you create for adult ballet dancers. So, I love your work so much, and I'm so grateful for everything you do. And guys, we are obviously going to talk about ballet today, but I feel like a lot of what we're going to talk about is going to be relevant to dance in general, and honestly, just to human beings in general, because we're going to be talking about movement in general. So today's focus is body-based intelligence. Me and Julie have had various conversations online, by the way. If you enjoy this one, I'll have a few of our other ones linked. You can go back in time and catch up the world when I was also very deep in the adult ballet world, which is such a wonderful, just supportive and creative space. So it's so exciting that I still get to have these conversations, really. But we're going to talk about body-based intelligence today. I want to go over a little bit of like what it is for me, what it means to me, how I include it, and then do talk about how she approaches adult ballet from like a body-based intelligence approach as well. So you'll get to see kind of both sides, a bit of side and a practical, like very much applied to the body side as well. So I'll start by giving my definition, and this is just going to run like a conversation between me and Julie, because we often have these conversations and we're like, this could be really helpful for people. Let's record it. So here we're doing it. Body-based intelligence is really about an awareness of, a connection to, and a care for our own body, which helps us care for other bodies, which helps us care for our celestial body, which is planet Earth. So I see all these three things as being very linked. But the main focus for me as a coach is the first part, where it's about our own body. So are we aware of what's happening in our own body? Are we connected to what's going on in our own body? Not from a top-down control type of way, like I'm moving my body so it looks like this to make these shapes in ballet or whatever, or dance or whatever it is. But am I actually aware of my bodily sensations as I'm doing that? Am I receiving all the feedback that's going on? And then, of course, the last part, care for our bodies. And this is, I could talk about all three of these aspects for so long, but the part of actually caring for our bodies, we don't, like, it kind of blows my mind, but like we don't get taught that. We actually don't get taught how to care for our bodies. It's like our first home and our last home, this thing that we have here. And for me, this body intelligence is such a way in to caring for our bodies that's not just going through a checklist of like external to-do lists that other people have told us, like that as well, for sure. Like experiment with those things but ultimately we have to be able to have the connection in order to know if those things are really working for us. So that's kind of like my framework of body-based intelligence. Julie, I'd love to hear if you have like a slightly different take on it, anything to add, where you particularly focus.
Yeah, I think when it comes to your body, a really common phrase in movement is listen to your body, quote unquote, listen to your body. But it's like, well, sometimes my body's tired. What does that mean? Does that always mean I should stop? Sometimes stretching hurts. Does that mean I should stop? Sometimes being out of breath is scary. Should I stop? Sometimes working on cardio is really painful. Should I stop? Like these blanket terms of pain and tiredness and exhaustion are not teased out into when it's necessary to stop and when it's safe to push your limits. And I think when we're not taught this of actually quote unquote listening to your body, it's like this trite saying of listen to your body. And it's like, well, if I literally listened to everything my body wanted, I would eat donuts every morning for breakfast and I would not work out too often. And I would do all kinds of things. My body has all kinds of signals, but some of them are more nuanced than that. And some of them are really warning signs that I must do something right now. And some of them are, urgent, and some of them are negotiable. And, the learning which is actually an art in the same way that, I don't have children, but I have pets, and you can tell when your pet really needs to go outside right now. You can tell it's a different cry than if they're just like, meh, I want lunch 20 minutes early. That's like a different cry than like, I really am having a stomach problem. I need to go outside right now. And so it's like, we listen to our dogs' bodies in that way, but yet our own body, we don't know how to do that. Or we're just taught that it's a little bit more like a black box in a sense, where we don't listen to our own sensations with as much discernment as we know every single one of our dogs' cries. And I assume it's the same with children, if not more intense, that you know every fold of your dog's ears, you know their needs. And I feel for me, body-based intelligence has a lot to do with that of like, when can I push and when do I need to stop? Because you're never going to change your body unless you push past some of those signals, but you must not push past the ones that you shouldn't push past. So how are you supposed to know which one? And I think that is a really important question. I'm not giving anyone an answer right now because I don't have an answer. It's different every day, and it's different for your body, and it's different for you, and it's different for me, and it's different for your goals. But how do you know? How do you know if you're being safe or you're being dangerous? How do you know?
Yeah. And I think it's really funny conversation, because I know that Julie and I have come at this from kind of different sides in some ways, of like which signals we were right versus which ones we didn't. And so that's kind of nice to have both sides of this conversation. I want to pull out two things that you already said there, Julie. Like the first one is, when we're thinking about animals, anyone who has pets, or potentially not, children who are young and maybe don't have all the faculties of language yet, that this is so important. And we know it intuitively if you understand that that is how your pets communicate. They communicate through the body. They're very connected to their body. They actually have no choice, because there's nothing else to help them survive other than being attuned to that. And that because we have this gift of language, like it's one of every gift with a shadow side for human beings. So this is why I always enjoy taking an evolutionary approach as well to stuff, so that we can understand, like, why do we have it? What's it useful for? And when are we overusing it? Like, kind of like, can you overuse anything? Extend the rule too far when it doesn't actually apply. So, if we think about language, super useful for talking about difficult concepts. Like if Julie and I tried to have a conversation now about body-based intelligence with our bodies, that would be quite interesting, but I don't think we get across quite as much of the actual
Right. Well, if we didn't have language, we probably wouldn't even need this conversation to begin with, because we would already have it. So there is that.
Yeah, it's very true. So, like, there's so many possibilities. It allows us to coordinate in all the ways that very uniquely are able to coordinate in all the things built on in this earth and whatever else. But when it goes too far and we think that every type of information is language information, then we miss all of this stuff that's going on inside. And I think, Julie, you brought up something really important in a class or something like that. For example, when a teacher says listen to your body, we must remember that there's always so much competing input for our attention and our energy. So there's the input of like the sounds, there's the smells, there's proprioception. Hopefully, if we're connected to that, there's other people in the class. There's what the teacher thinks I should be doing. There's what my classmates think I should be doing. There's the reflection in the mirror, what I'm thinking about that going on. And so even saying it, like, it's not that, even if we knew how to do it, which is a whole other thing that we're starting to talk about, like, do we even know how to really listen? Even if we did know how to listen, it's not as easy as just saying that, because we may be still listening to, like, yeah, okay, that sounds nice, but I'm more interested in listening right now to what the teacher's telling me to do than what my body's telling me not to do, or whatever, or it could be vice versa. Right. So I think really important point. And then I want to come back to the donut thing, because I think that's such a perfect example that where we can start to dissect, like, okay, if I actually just listen to my body in every single given moment in like what it wants me to do, we would be eating like ice cream for breakfast sometimes, or we would be like, I know I would be staying in bed for like longer than I wanted to, or whatever. And when we start to understand that that's not because we're lazy people, that's not because we're bad people, that's not because of whatever stories that we might have told ourselves before and like put shame on top of it, but it's because of our evolution. So let's take the donut, for example. Back in the day, sugar was really hard to come by. Like, sugar itself wasn't a thing. Like, it was either in the cane or it was in honey or whatever. Very scarce, hard to get. And when you got it, it was like such an amazing treat, right? And then same thing with fat. You know, we didn't have vegetable oils sitting there. You had to get it like probably from some of the meat that you were eating, and it wasn't all of it. And then there was nuts and seeds, etc. So it's normal that our body's like, oh, it's really good to get this stuff. Like, let's reward us for finding this, as if we've had to hunt it or forage it when we just went to the supermarket, to be honest. So, you know, it's just coming to an understanding of like what our body's actually trying to do, what the signals are trying to tell us, and then working with it instead of working against it, and coming to, I think, like a holistic perspective in terms of body-based intelligence, short-term decisions and long-term decisions. And sometimes, and that's always a trade, well, not always a trade-off, but it's quite often a trade-off. Yeah, Julie, for you, like, what were some of the first questions that you had around, like, which side is this? Is this one of the signals that I can move past, or is it one of the ones that I really need to listen to? Like, when were you even first aware of those questions?
I first became aware of those questions when I was probably around 20. I can't remember exactly when, 20, maybe 19 or 20. And I was on my way to school. One day I was living in New York City and just like fainted on the train. I fainted on the subway. And after that, I was like, okay, so I'm young and I passed out on a subway in a public space in a very dangerous location in the middle of a day. What is this about? Like, what is going on here? And so that, kind of led me to just begin asking the question of what's going on here, right? Like, I had no idea what's going on here, but all I knew was like, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to have this continue to happen. Like, this is, to me, not something I want regularly in my life, right? So like, what is going on here? And so then that took me down. I mean, it wasn't an instant change. I mean, it took me years to figure out what was going on here, quote unquote, right? But that was the beginning of me thinking, how is my food affecting me? How is my body responding to different foods? What am I eating? How am I feeling after I eat? Like, what's going on with my body? And I found a ton. I mean, I was very, very, very dependent on eating very regularly. Like, I couldn't skip any like minutes of a meal, right? It was like, my body was like, we need food right now. And I'm like, this can't be correct. Like, I'm thinking to myself, like, this, like, people lived before they could get food on a regular basis. So like, my body must be able to handle this at some, like, there must be a way to not eat for an extra hour and not pass out, right? There must be a way to have a smaller breakfast or whatever and not pass out on the train, right? So that just began to lead me to open and be like, how is that possible? Where are we? What's going on? And trying different foods and different diets and different ways of eating, and paying close attention to, like, when really that became the question of, like, I would just try to test my limits and be like, okay, right now I'm feeling a little bit lightheaded. Is that because I'm nervous about fainting? Is that because I'm actually hungry? Is that because I'm standing with my knees locked? Is that because, any number of factors, right? And just started asking, like, okay, do I need to eat right now, or can I wait another minute? And then just started kind of trying to see and decipher the feelings that are going on in my body, and would just have like food, easy food ready, like applesauce, that's very quick to eat and absorb in the body, and then would just feel safer and safer to experiment and try and see like, okay, what is this signal telling me right now? What is this going on? And just try to like get, into the feeling of it and understand. And I did struggle with the feeling of anxiety being very similar to the feeling of being lightheaded. And so at a certain point, then I got anxious about being lightheaded, and then it was like a whole vibe. Like it took me a very long time to like separate all of this out. But that for me, that was the entrance into this journey of like, what do I need right now? Is this urgent? Is this not urgent? And just asking that question.
Yeah. I feel like that moment where the body is not suddenly following the commands of the mind is the moment where lots of us are like, oh, hold on a second, you mean my body has a choice in this, that I'm not controlling everything from up here and just telling my body what to do all day, every day, all the time. Like sometimes my body has like its own agenda or its own choices in things, and I have to like this.
And understand what it's saying, right? Like when is it urgent? Like when is it literally dangerous right now that I'm going to be unsafe? And when is it okay to keep going? And what do I need to eat on a regular basis to make sure I'm feeling that this doesn't happen? And, you really have to get in touch with what your body needs, because you need to keep going and stay upright. And, so for me, it was like kind of an urgent matter to sort it out, even though it did take me quite some time to sort it out, maybe like 5-6 years to sort out the answers to these questions and what to eat and all of that. But it was super important to me to figure out what my body needed to eat in order to have energy to make it through the day.
Yeah. And during those 5 years, were you getting progressively closer to the answer? Or was it like it just took you looking in different areas, really tuning in order to then like actually make quite a quick turn? Do you know what I mean? Progressive being like, okay, I see this is actually getting a little bit better when I eat this for breakfast, but not that, and so let me continue. Or was it more like, I don't know, I'm learning, and then you kind of like, okay, it all slots together like this?
It was definitely not as linear as any of us would hope, but I don't think any learning is as linear as any of us would hope. I think that's the biggest thing about everything, is it takes a really long time and you're mostly lost for most of it, and you have to just keep looking and exploring. I definitely, I like explored several different types of diets and eating, ones that were like more heavy on carbs, ones that were more heavy on fat, ones that were more heavy on protein, more meat, more dairy, less dairy, like kind of went through a lot of different areas of food, and, eventually settled on one where I felt the best, which was like mostly meat-based, mostly meat, and very little carbs. I found that for me, when I had such a carb heavy diet, that I would need it very quickly. And I would find that I would get this really, really big drop or crash afterwards. And then when I got so low, then that's when I started feeling like the lightheaded and all of that stuff. So I kind of shied away from that being as my main source of food and fuel. But that took quite a while. And then it took a long time to trust my body to be able to handle hunger. So once I kind of felt like I had that under control, that was like maybe a few years, like maybe 4 years of trying all the different foods and, always having a snack in my bag, right? Just to make sure. And then I had the gift of getting to work remotely for my company. At the time, I was maybe like 24, 25. And at that point, I felt much safer to experiment with going longer without food, because I was at home and I could like eat if I needed to, and wouldn't be in a public setting experimenting with going more than 3 hours without eating, right? And so I would just like have food ready and would just try and just see like, am I hungry right now? Or am I just nervous about getting hungry, or what's going on? And would just get food ready. So really it wasn't until that time of getting to work from home where I could build that trust with my body, where I could try to not oblige the hunger in the immediate moment. Because when I was outside and out and about and I didn't oblige it in the immediate moment, it felt too high risk. So I couldn't really experiment with the feeling. And then once I could work from home, I could see and play, like push it a little farther and be like, I don't think this is hunger. Let me take that as a hypothesis and wait 20 minutes and see what happens. And then I could see if I was right or wrong. But if I was out in public, I wasn't able to check my hypothesis and see like, okay, I don't think I'm hungry right now, because it was too risky, feelingly risky. Yeah. So that was really the period that let me actually experiment and say like, I think this is what I'm feeling. Am I right or am I wrong? Because if you don't know if you're right or wrong, you can't learn.
Yeah, I think it's so important, because it's the fundamental way of learning body-based intelligence is the experimentation. And I think that's why, in one way, it's why it's so powerful. And the more you experiment, the more you get better and the more intuitive it actually becomes. And then you have a much better idea because you already have a lot of previous evidence of what your body like deals well with or not well with. And this goes for everything, like not only for food, but I think it's a really interesting place to start because I think probably lots of people can relate to it. I know I really, when I added in some more fat to my diet, it helped, I think, with the glucose spikes, which I didn't know what that was at the point. That experimental need to. That was the thing, is like when you come from a body-based intelligence approach, you don't actually need to know exactly what the science of the stuff behind it is. Like I didn't need to know that was something that was happening to me because I used to also like get hungry and like get lightheaded, and especially in the summer in Madrid because it's so hot.
Yes, always in the summer. Yeah.
When I started to realize like, oh, but when I actually eat fat in every meal as well, like whether it's an avocado or olives or whatever it is, I realized that that doesn't happen as much. So, okay, that's interesting. I didn't need to know that it was the glucose in my blood. Like I know that now, but I didn't need to know that in order to start to improve it. So
right.
I think what I like to call me search instead of research.
That's awesome.
It's a fundamental pillar of body-based intelligence in a way. But because, I think it's something me and you definitely have in common is this concept of me search in a lot of ways, in the way that we teach, in the way that we approach life, and lots of things. And it's such a kind of empowering thing, but at the same time, sometimes it does take a little longer. But the interesting thing about your story, Julie, is that some people in that moment, if they had, like, for example, fainted, immediate answer is there's something wrong with me. I must consult an expert now, and I have no way of thinking about this or dealing with this or approaching this or anything. And so you kind of are in a way from your body. All of a sudden it's like, my body's wrong. I need this. There's nothing I can do. So the answer is expert. Like, I'm interested because you're actually quite young as well. Like, how did you already have this idea that maybe I can figure this out?
I'm not sure that I had that idea, or I was just too embarrassed to actually go seek help. I think it was more that I was embarrassed and I didn't want to pay the medical fees, and I didn't even know which doctor to go to. So I think if I was going to have to figure out which doctor to go to, I would also have to start the research process in general. So I think it was for me a combination of like shame and being extraordinarily cheap that I didn't want to seek help for it. I don't think it was that I thought I could figure it out. I think it was just like, oh man, like this is a real problem. Like I need, I would need to, I can't tell anybody, like if my mom ever listens to this, she doesn't know about this story. So this will be her first time knowing about this. So it was just really embarrassing for me that I was that young and I don't know if I was sick or what, who knows exactly the word you would describe it as, but I didn't find it to be somewhere that I wanted to be. And I didn't feel like I had anybody who I wanted to go to. Like I definitely had people I trusted in my life. It's not that, but it's like, it was like that I hadn't been taking care of myself, or that I had, moved away to New York City by myself and I didn't even know how to eat right. Or like that I was, if I told anybody, it would mean that I wasn't responsible enough to be living on my own, or that it would mean something about me that I had let this happen. And so I think that embarrassment led me to research on my own. So I don't think I would have to say I accidentally fell into the body-based intelligence thing. And I'm glad I did, but I think for other things, I'm much more likely to just go to an expert right away. So it's kind of funny that in this particular case, I didn't, although I did read a lot of books and did spend a ton of time researching on the internet with, from different nutritionists and points of view and the science about it. But yeah, I think it was only driven by personal embarrassment and not having money as a college kid.
Well, thank you for the honesty. Like, I think that probably liberates quite a lot of people listening, because like, I know I've been there in terms of the money and also the time, and also like, well, through different things in my life, I've also had moments where I started to like not have a lot of trust for some of the institutions and establishments. So that has also led me to be like, if the one place that's always with me is my body, how can I cultivate the most trusting relationship that I possibly can with my body? Because that will always serve me. Like, and then I can also, as you said, like go to other people that I trust, and also seek different perspectives, which is really helpful. Like not only, oh, this one, but who's saying the opposite and why are they saying that and what's their reason for that. And then ultimately let me try it and see how my actual real life lived body responds to doing these things.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's when you are, each person has their own personal risk tolerance that they want to take, right? So like for a person who would find it more risky to experiment on their own versus me, I found it more risky to expose that I had let this happen in my life, you know, whatever. So I think it's like everyone has their own risk. Like for some people, they might have found it to be way too dangerous to experiment with this on their own and they needed help right away. They didn't feel safe. They would want, that would feel less risky to them than, you know, trying it on your own and keeping it hidden, right? So like it's like a matter of you know, I always say you can choose your suffering in life. So it's like I didn't want to suffer the embarrassment of telling anybody or having to ask my parents for money to help me pay for a medical exploration. Then I have to tell them about it. Like that wasn't something I wanted to suffer through. But I could see in a different scenario, someone would rather suffer through that than the pain of, I mean, spending years experimenting on their own. Like I don't know, maybe I could have gotten an answer in a week, but I didn't. It took me years. So
Yeah.
it's like, what do you want? You know, what risk do you want to take in this scenario? What risk makes sense for you and your current and, you know, your situation?
Yeah, it's so true. When I think about like, because one of my own journeys in this, similar in terms of it being related to health stuff, was the like chronic wound condition that I was living with. Yes. And then being like, maybe this doesn't this and also just not really finding that many answers within medicine at that time because it wasn't that well researched. Like when I had it, like I guess like 23 when I came off the pill, and I was like, what the hell is still going on with my body? Like not what I wanted, people. And so at that point also being like, well, because I wonder where that thing comes from in me, that I was like, well, I'm going to look for answers on my own. Like, I don't know why I was like, oh, I'll just, I guess because I just don't surrender to lots of things. And there's a shadow side to that, by the way. But in this case, it was a good thing because I was like, I will not surrender the idea that the only answers are either surgery or going back on the pill, because I don't want to be back on the pill. So that, again, like I guess it's like, choose your suffering. I was like, I will not suffer either of those two things. So I'm gonna suffer through the experimentation, trying things that might work, trying things that might not work, learning so many things, like taking the time and energy to do the research and to try it out on myself, and then coming to answers which I don't think, like, even if you could have got a similar answer quicker, there's something about, and there's definitely a place for that, especially something life-threatening, like obviously in those moments, please like get the fastest answer possible. But for something, at least for me, this was like more chronic, and I was able to live with it out. Like I almost felt like I was dying once a month, but more or less I was like, I will get through this. But just having that thing, I was like, okay, I'm learning constantly, even though I'm not fixing this problem like that. Constantly so much more than just my own like the womb condition and stuff around my womb. Like I was learning about my digestive system all of a sudden. I was learning about my energy levels all of a sudden. I was learning about my emotions all of a sudden. I was like, oh, there's lots of things that are coming from just the fact that I'm tuning into my body so much more and experimenting my external environment and seeing how all those things are intertwined and they all interrelate.
I find it just so interesting that we are taught to be afraid of that experimentation with our own bodies, and yet I just always compare how I take care of, how I would as a kid, as an early, you know, before this whole thing, take care of myself versus how I take care of the dogs. I don't know what the hell they need. So I experiment. I try this, I try that, I try to give them this, I try to give them that, I try this, I call the vet, I take them here, I try this, and I don't know, eventually we figure out how to calm them down or whatever's going on. So it's like, I don't feel, I mean, you experiment with them rather freely, but yet, and a lot of people do with their pets, you know, with their kids or with their pets, but with your own body, you're like, oh, I can't experiment with my body. I can't try this. I can't try that. Which I find to be so interesting. It's like, I find this type of conversation to be so difficult to have, and I hope that the nuance surrounds it, sticks with it, but it's like, it's almost like you're not allowed to have pain, and therefore you're not allowed to try things, like in this case where, you know, with the endometriosis, and or with, you know, for me with the food situation, it's like you aren't allowed to choose to suffer pain in your body in an attempt to heal. And it's like, obviously there's so many things where, I don't know, people should get help for or whatever, but it's like, that should be one of the choices on the table. Like you can choose to keep your fever. You can choose to let your body be hot and kill whatever's in there if you want, or not. Or you can choose to take a painkiller and get rid of that. But to say that it's like you're not allowed to suffer that, you need to either have surgery or you need to have the pill. It's like the doctor is liable for telling you the specific advice, and they can't just say like, leave it be and experiment with it, right? Because that's such a liability for them. So it's like that advice of that choice of trying and failing for a while is like not an option presented to us, which, I mean, you can understand how it takes place, but like, you can, you know, one of the things I've had to learn in business is like, you can choose to lose money. You can choose to lose money. If you want to lose money for an idea you have, or you want to lose money to change your mind, you're allowed to choose to lose money. You don't have to choose it, but if you have something you want, you're allowed to make that choice. You're allowed to have an unprofitable year. You're allowed, I mean, you don't have to, but it's a possibility, right? Yeah. There's so many things become a possibility when you're allowed to choose the, like, I will suffer this in the hope of learning something that I need to get out of it. I hope that made some sense.
Totally. And let's stay on the topic of pain for a moment, because it's so important in this. And then we will come on to talking about dance. So people are like, when are they going to talk about dance? We will, we promise. But this thing about pain, there's a phrase that I love, which is, if you can't feel it, you can't heal it. And for me, that has been so true, whether it's like a problem in Jordan and I's relationship, like as I ignore it, and if I don't want to feel it, we won't resolve it. Like that is just sure. Or whether it's like physically as well, I needed the feedback of the pain and like how painful my periods were each month to know if I'm on the right track or not. If I was always thinking, I wouldn't have the information that I need. And so pain, again, is just our body's way of communicating with us. Like, it's not the nicest one, but it's the same type of communication as pleasure is, when it's like, this is a good thing. So I know that one feels good and one doesn't feel so good, but they're both useful, and they both have a place. And at least, like, maybe let's talk about our own relationship to pain, because again, I think we may have come at this from like different sides in some ways. Like, I was not good at dealing with emotional pain, but I was really good at dealing with physical pain. I would just almost think like, the more physical pain, the better. But I was only able to do that when I was in control of it. For example, dancing. I can push myself to like the point of almost being sick. And now that I say that, I'm like, oh yeah, I learned that from my dad. Because when he used to do like training with his athletes, they would like vomit at the top of the hill. And I thought like, oh, that's fine. That's good. That means you've worked hard. Anyway, or bleeding toes or whatever it was. And like this glorification of pain, I guess, in some way in the dance world, or, you know, high performance, whatever. And I understand where that concept comes from, because we do have to be able to push through some of the limits where we're like, oh, this is getting painful now, I continue. Oh, this is verging on pain now, do I need to continue, or is this maybe a time to like slow down? And there's, I guess, where the choice comes in, I guess, if you're depending on like who you are and what your goals are, etc. But I had to learn to really start to feel my pain, because I was so used to pain. I mean, I was just so used to pain, I think, in general, that I was disassociated from it. And that was also why Bodybased has been such a huge thing in my life, because I didn't listen to my body for so long. I was just like, you just do what I tell you. I don't care what you're saying. I don't care what you need. I don't care. Like, yeah, I kind of care what you need. I'll do the basics, but I wasn't in any kind of like loving relationship with my body whatsoever. And learning to connect to the pain has been my biggest teacher. Like, and I'm so grateful for the pain signals in my body when I finally was like, I'm ready to listen to you now, and we're going to work together to figure out what's useful and what's like extra that we don't need.
Ballet teachers love you for this, or did they tell, or did they try to help you temper it?
No, no
They
one.
loved you for it, right? Because it was so great that you would push so far.
I think in my whole life, no one has ever been like, "You're doing too much."
Yeah.
No, I don't think I've heard those words. I had to tell myself that. And that's, that's because of, coming from the family that I do. And there are so many great things about that, like both of my parents have achieved like lots of things. And, lots of my friends who are also dancing and other things, like people have achieved lots of things. But I'm like, what's the price of this achievement? Like, what's actually the cost for me right now?
Yeah.
And as well. And for example, I know I'll talk about Jordan for a second, but he came from really like the opposite side where pain was not allowed. Like pain was not allowed. Physical or emotional pain was not allowed in his household. And so this prevented him from doing and living so many things. So I understand that both of them, yeah, like, I don't know, we all have things to learn from each other, I guess, and we just have to find a middle ground. But certainly there was no one in my life that was ever like, that's, you're doing too much. It was like, great, going. Oh, you're really tired? Yeah, that's fine. And what I learned, I mean, I can't really blame, it's no blame on anyone else, because, ultimately, especially when I was at university, like I'm an adult at this point, and I'm like drinking Red Bull every morning because I'm like, I need to keep going. No one's telling me I'm doing too much. So I can't do this without some external chemical to help like boost my levels. So this must be the thing that I need to do. And then I developed an addiction to Red Bull. So many things where there was never a moment of shall we look at this, reassess, just think like it's actually worth it. And then that process also, again, it's not easy, and it doesn't happen in a moment. It's like you have to, as you said, build up the trust with yourself. Can I trust myself to notice the pain when it's there? Can I trust myself to listen to it? And still now, sometimes I overwrite it.
Yeah. Still, but that's your prerogative. You're allowed to as well.
I can do it. And then I can also be like, okay, what was the cost of that? Do I want to do it again next time? Yes or no? And then usually I'm like, no, I don't. And then I'll make the same mistake, but keep learning. But it kind of comes back to your point about, are we allowed to feel pain? Are we allowed to make mistakes? And I was allowed to feel pain, but I wasn't allowed to make mistakes. And they're kind of somehow linked in a way. Because the perfection of like, you can live a life pain-free and you can live a life without making mistakes, that doesn't exist. And so giving ourselves permission is super helpful. But yeah, sorry, I want to hear your side, Julie, of this.
Yeah. It's always, I think that one of the reasons why our conversations are always so fun is that we have come to the same place, but from the opposite side. Like almost everything, almost nothing we talk about, we had the same journey, but we have arrived in the same location, which is hysterical. And just goes to show you that you can't just take blanket step-by-step instructions from anybody, because you are coming from somewhere else. Like we're all saying to arrive at the same place of freedom in your body and choices and agency, but you and I had to learn very different lessons, because I had the opposite situation where pain wasn't allowed, and we had to be happy all the time. You weren't allowed to get a sunburn, you weren't allowed to get a scrape on your knee, you weren't allowed to like push physically beyond tiredness. Like it just wasn't something we did. I don't think it was ever explicitly said, but it just wasn't something that happened. Like if you came home with a sunburn, it's like a sad time. It's like sad, like, oh my gosh, you're in pain. This is so sad for everybody here, right? So you just get the message that if you're in pain, it's sad for everybody else around you. And not to say that it's not sad when someone's in pain, but it's like when you feel that your own pain is causing other people so much pain, then you feel that you shouldn't have it, or you should hide it, or you should, avoid it whenever possible. And so for me, I definitely, and I grew up with people telling me I was doing too much constantly. Everybody told me, stop. You're doing too much. Stop doing this. Stop taking these classes. And I'm like, but they're fun. I want to learn this stuff. Why can't I take these classes? Like, when I went to college, it was so fun because you could just pick as many classes as you wanted, and you could pick all the subjects you wanted, and it was so great. And everyone's like, oh, you're overloading yourself, you're overworking yourself. And I'm like, I'm only here for 4 years and I already paid for all the units. So why can't I take all the classes that I want to take? But to me, I've always questioned that. Am I doing too much? Because people tell me, stop doing so much. You're overworking yourself. You're going to burn out. You're going to this, you're going to that, threatening me with, you're going to go to the hospital for exhaustion. You're going to burn out. And I'm like, how do you know? So I've had to come to the place of like, I'm A, I'm allowed to get myself that far if I wanted to, but B, that you can work as hard as you enjoy, and then you cannot work as hard as you don't enjoy. And if you have fun pushing your body to its limits, you can do that. And if you don't have fun with that, you don't have to do that. And you can play with your own limits. You don't have to, like when you hit them, you don't have to accept it. You can, and sometimes you need to, but you don't have to. It's allowed to find your limits, which sometimes means you get a little hurt. Sometimes it means you get a little scraped. Sometimes it means you get a little tired. Sometimes it means you went too far, you took on too many things. Like it can mean all of these things. And you can still do it. Like you're allowed to get tired. You're allowed to work too hard. You're allowed to try to find your limits. And so for me, I had to come at it from that angle of like, if I'm having fun and enjoying this, I don't want to stop. I don't need to stop. And sometimes maybe I take it too far and work too much just because I'm learning where that limit is for me. But I think for both of us, what it came down to was that half of the end of the spectrum on one side was removed as a possibility, right? So that's when I think you start to lose that choice, is when you or lose that intelligence, because then you saying to yourself, well, I don't feel tired, but everyone's saying I should be tired. So maybe this is what tired feels like, because everybody's saying I should be tired and I'm not tired. But maybe that's because I don't know what tired is and they know what tired is. And so then you start to question yourself, because you're saying like, and in your case, you're like, I'm in a lot of pain, but they say I need to keep going. So maybe this isn't what pain is. And maybe I should keep going. And maybe they're in more pain. And so I should keep going. So I think that feeling is when you start to say like, I must be wrong because all these people are telling me this, and this is the message I'm receiving. So I must be the one who's confused about what this feeling is. Like I must need more rest. I must need to do less things. I must need to just be okay with being bored. I must need to just accept a normal life. Like I must need that because that's what everyone's telling me I need. So I think that is when you start to lose the connection with the body, when someone says, whether or not they told you, I don't know how exactly it happens, but you somehow got the message that your feeling is not correct.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not correct. Maybe it is correct, but that exploration is what you need to figure out as you come into your own.
Yeah, totally. Oh, it's so fascinating how, as you said, we've received completely the opposite messages. Like for me, it was absolutely the fact of like, you can't be tired because we're still doing these things, or like this be done, or you've still got to go to your cello class after this, or you've got to do this homework, and aren't you going to see your friends after, and don't you want to do are you helping with this, whatever. And of course, like I think for both of us, like all of those messages were super well intentioned.
Always.
Those are all about keeping us safe, and everybody's understanding of what keeps us safe. On the one hand, it might be avoiding any risk is what keeps you safe, and on my hand, your potential is what keeps you safe. Like everyone's just looking for safety ultimately.
And they could be right. You know, it's like who knows in that time, for the parents, for the community, for the society, for the teachers, for whoever is trying to just set these sweet children up for success. They're just, and none of us knows what success is at that age. So everyone's just trying to figure it out. And then you come to a place in your life where you're old enough to actually make some of your own decisions, and you think, what do I want to do with that information? And then that's when the fun starts, I think, because then you can look back at all this stuff and be like, I can see why they thought that would be whatever. You know, I can see why they wanted to avoid me working so hard that I burned out, because a lot of people were working to, you know, we could have traded families and societies and cultures, and we would have ended up in the middle, right? But like both were trying to keep us from, just trying to set us up for success in our life. And it's like, and now we have that to work from, and we can keep going.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really interesting, because what we're talking about is not finding a perfect balance point in the middle. I think what we're really talking about is having access to the full range of both sides. Like for me, I understand now that really life is about the range. Like life is about how much can you deal with here, and how much can you deal with here, and how much do you have access to your own intelligence and intuition in all of these different scenarios across a huge range of possibilities that could happen in life. So I think that's super, I mean, for me anyway, it's been super useful. This conversation, as we're coming on to talking about parents now, let's talk about teachers, because actually we both have teachers in our family, but not because of that, but because of actually the fact of, if there are teachers listening right now who are dance teachers or movement teachers or any kind of teacher what we're talking about now, I feel is useful because as you look at your students, even just understanding that some of them might be coming from a side that's I'm scared to do more, and some of them might be from a side of like, am I doing enough? And it's kind of difficult as a teacher. I mean, as a teacher,
So difficult.
We just can't. So, but instilling body-based intelligence into students gives them the opportunity to manage some of those things without you having to do it from the outside, because we can never do it as well. And I think this is also to really like finish and wrap up on this pain piece. Why I include other people's bodies in body-based intelligence as well is the understanding that you will never be able to manage someone else's pain as well as they can, because they're the ones that need to like take the deep breath or go and sleep or do more or whatever it is. They're the only ones that can actually manage the pain. You can't manage the pain from outside, but that's what we try to do, right? That's how we try to control people's behaviors and do the things that we think we would do if we were them. And then the point of disconnection from what we actually feel and feeling like somehow how the signals that our bodies send are wrong. They can't be wrong. Like, they might not be appropriate for the environment that we're in, but they're not wrong. Like, they're here. Like, we must be present to them and do something with them. So from your point of view as a teacher, like, how does all this play out? Because it's so much to take on. But maybe we could start with like an example of a place where you see some of your students not being able to access their body-based intelligence, and how do you help them get into it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that it is super tough. It is super tough when you have a group of people who have different goals and different starting points and different desires and different focus levels and different life that day, right? Someone just lost a family member, someone just got a promotion. You know, you've got all ends of every spectrum in every class. And so as a teacher, it's like, you're just doing your best, right? You're out there doing your best to convey what you have to share, and you put it out there and you hope some people take it and take it the way you meant it, and you know, you give it your all. But I think one of the biggest things I try to instill in people is this the easiest example to try to instill in people is like, we're all trying to get a straight spine. We're all trying to get our spine straight for the most part, right? Like, not totally flat, no curves, but like basically we're all trying to move our spine into a vertical place. Some of you are going to be leaning back and you need to lean forward to be straight. And some of you are going to be leaning forward and you need to stand up straighter. You need to look in the mirror and look at your back, and here are the points you need to see. Your shoulder needs to be here, your hip needs to be here, and this is what you're looking for. And you personally need your own step-by-step user's manual for your spine of how you will make your spine straight. We're all trying to get to the same general principle of a straight spine, but no single person has the same organization of vertebra that you need to adjust. So when I teach this, I'll have like special classes where for 25 minutes, all we do is explore your spine, and you try to move this and you try to move this and you try to move this, and you just see what ways is it more easy for you to move and what ways is it more difficult. And then that helps you discover what's going on. And then in regular class, when I don't have as much time to go into that, I'll say, straighten your, align, pull your upper back forward or stay straight or whatever it is. And that word has the meaning behind it, which that person knows how to do that. Because each person, to straighten their spine, quote unquote, has a different procedure because they're starting from a different non-straight spine, if that makes sense. So that's like the easiest illustration that can give a visual of what I'm talking about. Everyone wants basically the same thing: money, happiness, wealth, success, family, blah, blah, blah. But we're all starting from a different place. And that means something slightly different for each of us. And so how everybody gets there is a different process for every single person.
Yeah, I love it, because what you're kind of doing is you're leading people through MISA. It's like, come with Julie and do your MISA. It's like someone guiding you through the process. Like, that's actually super cool. And then they have all this insight into what's going on. I also want to touch on the example that we talked about the other day, Julie, which is the stretching one. Yeah. And just this idea of like what's actually going on sensation-wise internally. So do you mind sharing that example? Because that's helpful too.
Yeah, definitely. I think with flexibility, which is a huge goal for a lot of people, especially who are coming to dance, or even as you age, you get up off the floor and you're groaning and you're like, oh, I need to stretch. I think that's sort of a universal thing. Once you hit your mid-30s, you're like, I see. Yeah. You feel your body is restricting you, you feel the tightness, and you want to become more flexible, right? So a lot of people want to become more flexible, even if not for dance purposes, just for their life being more comfortable in their body. And so interestingly, when you start stretching, I think because we're not really taught how to stretch, people say you should stretch, right? If you don't know what you're looking for, you won't know how to get more flexible because you don't know exactly what is going on inside of your body. So as an example, I had a student come to me and say they wanted more flexible hamstrings, and they've been stretching hamstrings every day, making no progress. And feels like it's getting worse, even like they're not getting any progress. And so I asked this person, we had a private lesson together, and I asked them, where do you feel when you're stretching your hamstrings? Can you point on your body? Can you point with your finger to the location you feel the stretch? And this person had to think for a second. They thought, oh, I've never thought about that before. So then they bend over and go into a hamstring stretch, and they stay there for a moment. You can tell they're thinking, the head is moving. They're like, thinking. And then this person points to their back, to their lower back. And I'm like, okay, so you don't have a hamstring problem because you would feel it in your hamstrings or the back of your knees or where your femur bone attaches, or, you'd feel it anywhere along your hamstring. Like, you have a back problem. Your back is causing you pain, and go see somebody for your back. Either you can experiment yourself with massage, or you can go see a chiropractor and see. And sure enough, the person reported back a couple of weeks later, they went to the doctor and they have a lower back injury. And so stretching your hamstrings is going to, A, not improve your hamstrings if you have a lower back injury, but B, is going to aggravate your lower back injury. So if you're not paying attention, or you don't even know you should pay attention to where you feel it, you just say, my body hurts. Ow, my body hurts. Then you don't know that you're not making any progress. And you get so frustrated because you're stretching so hard, you're working so hard, you're stretching every day, you're following every advice in the book. But you're not getting any progress. And that's because you weren't receiving the right error messages, right? You weren't receiving the right information to give you the feedback that you have a back problem.
Yeah, this is it's such a great example because I think it's probably quite common. I mean, maybe not specifically the back, but even just this, just a question. I know I've asked it lots of times to teach as well. Where do you feel that? If you're telling me this is where you want to get more flexible, whatever, but where do you actually feel it? And I was even surprised as a teacher by the range of answers that I got back. Because even I have even knowing this, dealt with a lot of body-based intelligence thing, both in my body and in as theoretical concepts and with other people. I still have the human tendency to project my own stuff onto other people. I can work on that in my life, but it's still there. And so I sometimes I'm like, oh, probably it's whatever it was for me, for example, which is why asking these questions as a teacher is so important. And it doesn't, and I think there's something where we might think oh, but if I'm always having to ask them questions, maybe it's going to make me look like I don't know what I'm talking about. But it's you don't know what you're talking about in someone else's body. You know lots of things. Teachers, you are awesome. We love you. Thank you so much for all you do and all the opportunities to bring people. But there's some stuff that we don't know, and it's better to not know it and ask for the answers than try and make assumptions and give corrections where we're not sure what's going on. And I think, Julie, your example was so powerful, because here's a place where not only if not asking the question would have just maybe not helped for the stretching, but it could have made an injury worse. So always bringing the empowerment back into our students. And I think we're so lucky, especially because we work with adults, although from people that I know that work with kids, they've told me the same things. They've told me children have a very a lot of wisdom about their own bodies too. They're just not used to being asked about it. And actually that they do have the ability to identify these things, and sometimes potentially better than some adults, I guess. Probably better than me when I was that age. So I think that taking a deep breath as a teacher and just having the knowledge that it's okay not to know things, it's okay to ask as many questions as you want to our students, and that it not only helps us as teachers teach them better, but it helps them to get in touch with all of these things. And then from there, something that doesn't only exist in the dance. Like once people have connected with like, when I'm doing something, where does it hurt? That question alone will serve people for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it's a huge question. You know, I think your point about being a little afraid sometimes to ask questions is so important. And yeah, because as teachers and especially as dance teachers, we're probably perfectionists too. I know I am, and sometimes it's very scary to be in a room full of people or even in a private lesson, and you get caught off guard with something and you think, oh, you know, then you start spiraling in your own brain. You're like, oh my God, whatever, I don't know what I'm talking about, whatever, blah, whatever your brain wants to tell you in that moment. But you know, I find the most funny thing since I mean, with especially with private lessons where you have the ability to ask a ton of questions. In group class, obviously, it's a little bit harder to explore with each person, but you can lead a group exploration, but you can't ask each person. Like you can ask them all together, touch the place where you feel it, you know, blah blah blah. But with an individual person, one thing I found so funny is that when you don't know the answer to something, like let's say, where do you feel this in your hamstrings? And they say in my neck, and you're like, okay, I've never seen that before, right? Let me go look into that a little bit. Let me ask some of my physical therapist friends. Let me see if I can get some answers for you. I, at first, was so afraid that people would think I didn't know what I was talking about, but they actually felt so special, that they were so unique that they stumped me, that they were so unique that I had to go ask my fancy friends for help, and that they, you know, we're going to like investigate their case for them and, you know, like look into it or refer them to someone who can help them look into it. Like they actually, I mean, really, I don't think I've ever had it go another way where they get mad at me for not knowing the answer, even though that's what you fear sometimes. Yeah, they actually feel super validated. And they're like, wow, yeah, I did think that was weird. And I see that it is odd. And I'm really glad that we're going to find something, you know, I'm really glad that we're going to look into it together. Like people feel that they feel more supported than they do left high and dry by you not knowing the answer. So I think at first it can be super scary to ask where you feel it because you might get an answer that you don't know how to deal with. But yeah, I find, yeah, they're kind of tickled by the uniqueness of their body.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful point, and I find it so kind of lovely that whether it's teaching or now what I'm doing is coaching, and I feel like just in so many things in life, people just want to be seen and heard, and just have the time that we're looking at them as like the unique human being that they are. And I know that I'm probably going a little bit off philosophical now for some people, but that in itself is healing. That in itself gives people permission to be like, oh, okay, so I'm allowed to like be here and look inside myself and find what's going on for me. My experience in life is valid, whether or not I want to change how I'm doing things, or like change how I'm standing, or change how I'm stretching, or change how I'm dancing, or in what I do, if I want to change my behavior patterns, or I want to change how I react to something or whatever. Yeah, those options on the table. But like, even just the thing of being seen and accepted for exactly as you are now, and not being gaslit into thinking that the way you feel about things or how your body feels about something is wrong. Like none of it is wrong as such. It's just, what do you want? What's your goal? What's your outcome here that you're looking for?
Right. It's like if you quote unquote should be feeling your hamstring, stretching your hamstrings, and you're not, that's okay. Go fix the problem that's stopping you from feeling it in your hamstrings. You know, figure out why your neck is the thing that's hurting. Figure out why your back is the thing that's hurting. Take care of that, and then you'll probably feel it in your hamstrings afterwards. But it just because you aren't now doesn't mean that, I mean, there is something wrong in the sense that there is something else you are feeling other than your hamstrings. However, that's just showing you that there's like that we're saying pain is your greatest. Pain is going to help you navigate your goal, your physical goals, and where you feel the pain tells you where you need to go and look for the answer. If you don't know where you feel the pain, you're going to be looking in all the wrong places.
Yeah. So for you at the moment, Julie, like, where are you in your own journey with like body-based intelligence? Is there a particular place that you're experimenting with this? Is there specific lessons that you're learning? Is there a question that you're looking for an answer for right now?
So I'm in a very interesting place with body-based intelligence in that I've started singing lessons about 1.5 years ago, maybe coming up on 2 years here pretty soon. And singing is like the ultimate body experience. Like what you hear is not at all what you sound like. We all know this, right? You've listened to your voice on recording. You're like, oh God, is that really how I sound? I'm sorry, everyone has to hear that my voice like that. Oh my gosh, you know. But what you hear inside your head is very different than what comes out. And so singing is so interesting because you have to trust the sensations more than you trust your ears, because your ears are often incorrect about what is going on, and your feeling in your throat, your where you feel the sound buzzing is more important than what you're hearing in your ears. Like, you almost have to tune yourself out. I mean, you're listening to yourself, but you can't think to yourself, that sounds pretty to me, because if the sound sounds pretty, that means it's resonating so far back in your head that you can hear it. But if it doesn't sound, if it sounds a little bit more aggressive to you, if it sounds a little bit more nasally to you, then it probably means it's resonating out here where the audience can hear it and it sounds weird to you. So it's such an interesting experience to like weigh the feedback that you're receiving while you're singing, and to say, this sounds like, I'll have experiences where I'll be singing and my teacher's trying to get me to make a certain tone, and she'll be like, yes, that's it. And I'm like, that can't be what you want me to sound like. I'll say that literally, I cannot believe that that's how you want me to sound right now. That is horrible. And she's like, no, that's a beautiful sound. That sounds so resonant. And it's like really matching up your own perception of it with the external sound is so weird. And it's so strange to then you start to see what it feels like, and you say, oh, when that's how that sounds, it feels open in my throat. It feels there's space in the back of my head. I feel my stomach working. I feel my brain vibrating a little bit. And then you match those sensations to the sound. And when you can marry up the feeling in your body, then that's when you can create the consistency in the singing. So that is like such an interesting experience, because there is no way to manipulate your voice other than through your thoughts and your imagination. No way. You can't, nobody can come over and pick up your elbow. Nobody can come over and change the position of your head. Nobody can externally change your voice. The only thing, closest thing, is to hold your larynx down or to hold your cheeks from making a shape, but nobody can change what's going on inside of your throat, only your feelings, your thoughts, your experience. And so to me, that has been such a fascinating experience to see that process change. And even on days where I'm feeling a little bit more anxious or I'm feeling a little bit more confident, my voice is different. The feeling inside of my brain of how I feel about myself that day changes the voice that comes out of my body. It is bizarre. Yeah. It blows my mind and I'm sure it's everywhere, because everything is everything. And so just looking for where else that is, it truly blows my mind on a daily and weekly basis how the voice connects to your brain.
It's so cool, and I love hearing about your explorations both in singing and in jiu-jitsu, because you have this framework of body-based intelligence already, and the research that we've been talking about, you always have such insightful observations and things that you're learning from it, regardless of like how well it's going, like how's the song or like how is right. Did you win the fight or whatever. Like you have all this extra information that's like so fascinating to hear about. The one thing that we didn't really have that much time to talk about today is the aspects of emotion with body-based intelligence, but as we were just talking about singing, maybe we could just touch on it for a second here, because I talk about this with all my clients in every coaching program that I've ever run, which is that our emotions exist in our body. Like, thoughts are in our head for sure, but whenever there's an emotional response happening, whether it's sadness, excitement, fear, that's things are happening actually in our body as well. And so when we start to understand that by changing things about our body, we can change how we feel. And then also that sometimes when we're trying to do things with our body, that's causing a link to emotion, which we didn't realize. So I want to ask you from the singing perspective. Actually, you kind of touched on it right at the beginning when you were mentioning how sometimes the sensation of hunger and anxiety could feel somewhat similar in the body, and like figuring out what's going on there. But with the singing thing, what's the links for you in terms of, because you said then when sound that's like sounding good for everyone else, it's this open feeling and all of that. Like, is there an emotional component to that, and how did you work through it?
Oh yeah, there's a huge emotional component to it, in the same, sense as Often standing up straight for people has a huge emotional component to it, where when you ask people in a ballet studio or in a dance studio in general, and you tell them to stand up straight with their shoulders back, all of their insecurities come out, their chest size, their head. Who am I to stand up so tall? The arrogance of it, all of the layers, all of the feelings come out. When you simply ask somebody to hold their shoulders back and stand tall while they're making a mistake, oh my gosh, because to make a mistake, you should be down and you should be small. And so to ask somebody to maintain that posture while they know they're messing up, that is so difficult, because the emotion of shame is going to close down your body. You're going to physically close your chest. But in ballet, of course, in dance, of course, unless you're physically portraying shame, you want to be open and big and tall, and the emotional experience of making a mistake, forgetting a combination, falling out of a turn is going to close your body down, because, as you say, emotions live in the body, and naturally your body is going to react to the shame that you feel from making that mistake and will close up naturally without you even noticing. And I think with the voice, it's even more obvious than that, because your tone will change immediately. Whereas with your posture, it's not as like, it might not be as obvious. I mean, it is, maybe to a trained eye, but it's so obvious with your voice. Like your tone almost like drops if you lose the confidence. Your voice will stop if you get scared. Like you're singing and you mess up, your voice will literally stop, because you're like, ooh, I messed up, right? So the freeze.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Here's my hypothesis about that, which is that we've been taught from very young how to lie with our bodies. We've really been taught for a long time of like, hey, here's how to hide something with your body, because we want you, even in school, like you need to be sat and you need to be still, and you need to, while you're going through all kinds of emotional stuff in your body. So I feel like we've been training that stuff for a long time, but not so much the voice. Like that one's still quite connected because we use it so often. So yeah,
so connected.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Yes. Right. I totally feel that. I feel the days when I feel more shy or more nervous, it's very difficult to produce more sound. It's very difficult. Like I'll make a mistake and I can't keep singing through it. My voice will just stop. Like I feel that it's very fascinating how connected they are. Almost inextricably linked, like your feelings and your voice, which makes sense, because it's our voice is actually just a direct communication of our thought, right? Like in our eyes and our face and our facial expressions are all literally just direct mirrors of our emotions and our thoughts. And so your voice is just so funny how you become so aware of your voice when you're trying to get it to do something. And you see how, when you're not sure, like for me, when I'm not sure, and I started with particular singing anxiety where I wouldn't even sing in my first lesson. I only hummed because I was too afraid to like make sound. And my teacher's like, you literally came to a singing lesson and you're not going to sing. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm too scared and I'm here. So let's do something else. so
I mean,
yeah,
that's volumes to your dedication to like your own growth, because to show up and to be like, I'm not doing the thing you want me to do today, but this is what I'm going to do. I'll be here next week. And so like, it's so awesome, Julie. Honestly, it's so awesome. And also like where you are now, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's so funny. I can only imagine. I don't think this happens very often, because I think people just wouldn't show up if they're that afraid. But I'm like sort of, because like I was talking about that you're not allowed to be afraid when I was a kid. Like it was just so sad for people when I was afraid, that I'm just like, no, I do not want to be stopped by fear anymore. Like whatever it takes, I will be afraid and I will do stuff anyways. Like I maybe go the other direction on that too far with both singing and jujitsu, which are both basically staring fear in the face every week. For me, it's a very much a fear-based exploration of like, when I'm afraid, I can't sing very well. And when I feel I'm making mistakes, when I feel I'm missing notes, when I feel I'm not pronouncing things well, and I feel that anxiety coming up, then the voice just gets worse. And then I get more anxious, and then the voice gets worse. And it's just funny. I can't always stop this cycle, but it's funny to observe it and to see how it then, of course, as I can see it in myself, I can see it in more other people and can help them through that in the dance studio and see them falling out of their pirouettes. And surely they're having that same emotional experience of spiraling, and then the pirouette's getting worse, and then they're spiraling more, and blah, blah, it kind of goes. So it's very much like singing is extraordinarily emotional experience. Like sometimes I've had moments where I was singing and it was just, it felt so good and so free that I just like start crying and I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? Like this is, like what's my teacher's like, it's okay, it happens all the time. This is normal in singing class. I'm like, okay, but this is bizarre how connected it is.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. As you were talking through that spiral, I was thinking about pirouettes specifically for me. But it's true that we can, like our emotion, because emotions do live in the body, and we think like, oh, just because I'm annoyed that I felt my pirouette, or just because, at least for me, like I get angry about stuff. So like I'm like, okay, I'm angry about my pirouettes right now. And I'm thinking, like I used to think like, but that shouldn't affect my pirouettes. Let me go do it, and I'm going to give it everything. I'm going to do a double and it's going to be good. And then it's even worse. And then, as you said, like that continues because I didn't used to understand how the emotions were affecting literally like what was happening in my heart, what was happening in my muscles, what was happening in my breathing. And so body-based intelligence is this lovely way as well to interrupt the patterns. And as you say, we can't always do it. Like I still can't do it. Lots of times it could be a great time to interrupt a pattern. And I'm just in the moment and I'm like, I can't count. But every now and again, and like with practice, the possibility of just as much as possible bringing ourselves back to kind of homeostasis in terms of like, can I reclaim my breathing as my own conscious breathing, or am I just in this pattern of like shallow, like I can't do a pirouette breathing, or whether it's like anything. Sorry, you're gonna say something.
I always just say to people that pirouettes can smell your fear, that they
True.
And I think it's the same with high notes. I think it's the same with attacks in jujitsu class. I think it's just when you are afraid, your body is second guessing itself. Your body is not using its natural facilities. Your coordination is off because you're interrupting it with anxiety, anxious thoughts. Your training can't sort of kick in because you are interrupting it with these anxious thoughts of like, oh my God, I'm messing up. This is so embarrassing. I'm not good at this. I'm not, or you're mad at it, freaking pirouette, whatever it is. These thoughts are, let's say, milliseconds matter in this stuff. Like milliseconds matter timing wise, and if each thought takes a millisecond, you've messed it up with your thoughts. So it's like, yes, you are thinking about the technique of it, but you don't want to be interrupting it with these really heavy and emotional thoughts that disrupt your body. Because just thinking about a step-by-step procedure of like flatten your spine, use your elbow, use your tricep, use your back, those are not charged with emotion that's going to change your body language or your heart rate or anything, right? Or your like adrenaline levels. Those thoughts are neutral. They're just procedural. But when you put in like, God, you're so stupid, you can't get your back flat. God, you freaking mess up your pirouettes every time. You messed up all your pirouettes yesterday. Those are very heavy thoughts, and those are going to change your heart rate, your adrenaline, your timing, your sense of time, your feeling of balance, because they're so charged, and they're going to change your body. They're going to change your body. So you have to think neutral, procedural, helpful thoughts, and try to get at bay the heavily emotionally charged thoughts that change the technical experience of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful for teachers as well, just so that we can be aware of, the more neutral our language, the better, really. Because we're having to put, and like I know I did this many times as a teacher accidentally, and I know I still do it now sometimes as a coach, and like I will trigger shame in people because I don't know what all that. So, but the more neutral I can be in that, or the more encouraging, like I try to do that. And none of us can ever do it perfectly, but even just having an awareness of like, oh yeah, it's not helpful if I'm putting my students into a unhelpful emotional state at the same time as I'm asking them to do something complicated like a pirouette on point or something.
Right. Yeah, well, and exactly like that. Like when you're working on your voice in your passagios or your places where you switch from using your chest to your head to resonate your voice cracks a lot. When you get those cracks in your voice, they're always in that middle dicey area, and a lot of us have a lot of shame around those cracking areas. Me too. When my voice cracks, I like turn red, I blush, I get very embarrassed. And my teachers are always like, no, you have to let your voice crack. If you don't let your voice crack, it will never learn how to use that range. You have to allow it to crack. You must. And I'm like, I don't want it to crack. It's like the same with pirouettes. Like you must fall out of pirouettes until you stop falling out of pirouettes. If you do not fall out of pirouettes, you will never stop falling out of pirouettes. You You must
Yeah.
suck at this for a very long time before you stop sucking at this. You must. There is there is no way around it. And you have to do your best to not be so upset at the fact that you suck at this for a very long time until you will not suck at
Yeah.
this, to be perfectly blunt about the situation.
It's life lesson. Like, you have to go through the messy middle, the coaching. That's why I like to do longer programs, because it's not like one thing and then you've got the information and you go and do it. No, you have to go through the messy middle of like, this feels awful, this feels terrible, I went back to the and try again and like something else, and like, can someone just like give me a bit of support here? So we all have to go through the messy middle. But yeah, because of our education system that was like, we don't like the mess, don't show us any mess, we just want nice neat work, we want nice neat toes and everything. And so we think that's how it works, but the learning process happens much quicker when we allow ourselves to go through the messy middle and come out on the other side. Julie, we could literally talk for another 3 hours, I'm sure, but
I'm sure we could. I feel like we're just getting started, so
but let's for people who are like, hey, body-based intelligence sounds like something I'm interested in, I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna tell people about the workshop that I have come up in a second, but I wanted to give you an opportunity for people who want to explore this through dance, just to understand how they get to do that with you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is how I teach. I don't teach anything really other than this, because it is so much of what I believe. It's so much of what I've experienced. So every class I teach has all of this stuff infused in it, because this is the only way I think you can learn ballet as an adult. The only way is to learn where you are starting from, what you want, and how you're going to get there with your own body. So join me online, whether you like joining me live on Zoom or you like taking videos from past Julie, who's always lovely, who's on my recorded library. You can join me online at brocheballet.com and explore your body in the safety of your own home, where you can feel like you can try things, you can look silly, you can look stupid, you can experiment with me. You don't have to be in public to do this type of work, because it can be really hard to do this in your studio setting where it's moving really fast and there's people around and a teacher and all of that. So we explore it together, and it's a really fun environment of other adult dancers who have similar goals, passions, and loves. So come join us. We'll have fun. We'll figure out your spine. We'll get more flexible. All the goods.
Still pirouettes. I love it. Really, I think like you have such a unique approach, and it's such a blessing in the adult ballet space. So like, you know, I love your work so much, and I know so many of your students who like rave about you as well, which is so lovely.
Thank you.
I'll tell you guys also that at the end of this month, so we're in May 2023 right now, I don't know when you guys are watching this, but at the end of this month I'm going to be running a body-based intelligence training. It's not going to be dance specific, but it certainly can relate to dance stuff. We're going to be going over concepts, theoretical concepts, but also actually, obviously, of course, bringing it into the body and doing some practical exercises as well. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to leave the link to register your interest, and then if you're on that list, you'll get a discount code for when it's time, when the tickets come out, which they probably will be out actually once this is live, but you can still register here to get the discount code. And that's it. Thank you everyone for watching. Julie, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful, so fun. I hope it's been interesting for people. It's a slightly different take and perspective on dance and on life. Leave us your comments, your questions, DM us, get in touch. I'll also obviously leave Julie's links to her online school and everything in the description so you guys can find them, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you, Julie. Bye.